Hi, people. I've pulled an all-nighter. It's very windy outside, apparently Storm Arwen. If you're in the UK, if you're in North East England, Southern Scotland, stay safe today. Looks like stormy weather. Um, I came across a video which is a little bit troubling, but not overly surprising in the society that we're in. By which I mean, I don't mean that to sound overly cynical, but with 68 million people. Something like this isn't going to be, totally unusual. There's always going to be people in society who think this is a way to settle something. So basically, the video shows two guys fighting in the street, and it's quite violent. There's weapons involved. Wasn't easy to see what the weapons were, but this is in broad daylight in Kidderminster, Worcestershire. Um, and it's shocking because it is broad daylight, and because there's a crowd basically encouraging them. Now, I've made a video before on what I feel about street fights as opposed to controlled fights. Apparently, the police were eventually called, but they were met with a wall of silence. Now, that indicates to me that all the people involved they knew the two men fighting. So this is obviously some sort of internal feud. Everyone there obviously knows what was going on. This wasn't like passers-by sort of think, oh, what's happening? They were actively encouraging these guys. But it was quite troubling. One of them was clearly injured. There was blood coming from his head. Now, in the worst case scenario, had one of those men been seriously injured or even killed, then there'd be a situation where the crowd, because they were encouraging them, because they were doing nothing to break it up, they could probably be charged as accessories to manslaughter. Probably not murder because that wouldn't be the intention, but if one of the men died, then yeah, they would be accessories to manslaughter. Now, who knows what the background of this is? Are they fighting over money? Are they fighting over something, like just insults? And it's kind of male aggro in that sense. Are they fighting over a woman? Apparently it happened near a horse fair. So whether there was some sort of betting involved, I don't know. But the fact that everyone closed up with the police shows that at best, these are people who have no problem being on the wrong side of the law. That wall of silence thing usually happens when you have um, a fear of retribution if people speak to the police, tend to be within criminal communities. Um, it's not like someone was just minding their own business and they saw this and then the police asked them for information. Because most people in that situation would probably give information. These are people who knew what happened. Now, I don't think this doesn't concern me as much as, say, a gang attacking a totally innocent person or a mugging or those sort of incidents. This would be classed as a public order offence, and probably assault would be coming into that. Ultimately, the two guys were fighting. They obviously agreed to fight, or obviously broke into a fight. The only people they're harming is each other. They're not harming innocent people, but still, um, as a society, we do have to, consider that it's one thing if two guys lose their temper and get into a fist fight, but with weapons involved, I mean that's crazy. Is any feud worth that? Unless you're absolutely defending yourself or a loved one. But if it's male aggro, male ego can be a very powerful force. And if it's a fight over money or a woman, some guys will do it. They will really, they'd be prepared to kill another man for that, which is crazy. Um, oh, it's windy out there. But I just want to talk a little bit about something like this because like I say, ultimately they're fighting each other. They're not hurting anyone else. But I still think in society we can't say, well, it's fine, just let them get on with it. For one thing, it was on a road, so if a car is trying to get past, there's that factor, but I don't know. It's not a way to solve problems. And when we talk about being a civilized society, what's this? We're in 2021 and guys are beating the hell out of each other with weapons on the street. It's not good. But what I think's particularly troubling is the crowd. Now, two guys having a fight that obviously the temper's up. I'm not justifying it, but it's kind of self-explanatory. But the crowd, they're not angry. They're just encouraging this. Now, I'm not a pacifist. I think there are circumstances where you have to defend yourself, and therefore a degree of aggression or force or violence can be justified. Um, Thank goodness in this country we don't have a gun culture, because you can imagine the situation there. We'd have a lot more violence than we do. Um, but I do think there's a problem generally in society. There are too many people out there who are just too quick to use violence. They're too quick to, um, they've no self-control. We also have a yob culture, where people think it's perfectly okay to just insult strangers. And incidentally, the yob culture is sometimes associated with young people, but actually it goes right up to, I've seen middle-aged yobs, people in their 50s, who have come out with some appalling behaviour. It's a British problem. I think this, you can find examples of violence in every society, but I do think in recent years there's been this sort of desensitization in our society. I don't mean we've got more violent necessarily. And actually, in terms of violent crime, Britain is a fairly safe country. We don't even come close to some other parts of the world. But sometimes I look at, I go into the city centre here and, I live in Sunderland, but it could be any city in the country. That really doesn't matter. I honestly think it would be the same anywhere. Um, and you just get, teenagers yelling at each other across the street, people throwing their trash their rubbish, where they please, even though the council provides bins. There's just a selfish, antisocial mentality out there. And I don't want to be overly cynical. Of course, there's a lot of decent people as well who help out their neighbours, they're law abiding, they're decent people. But something like this, it may be this was just a situation that got out of control, but it's more likely that these guys, usually um, solve their disputes with violence. I know certainly the traveller community does. And recently I saw a video of Tyson Fury. I don't know when it was from exactly, but the video was posted recently where he was joining this kind of demo in Morecambe Town Centre about Traveller Lives Matter and complaining about discrimination because apparently pubs are throwing traveller men out. Well, I'm against discrimination, but at the same time, travellers, by their own admission, they always say we're good fighting men. We believe in settling things honestly with our fists. So you cannot basically be proud of having a violent way of solving problems and then complain that you're looked at in a certain light. That's just ridiculous. If you're going to go to a pub or a bar and then the doorman refuses you entry and then you come back with 30 armed thugs, don't complain that you have a violent reputation. Um, I mean, that sort of mentality, it's primitive, it's backward. And anyone who does that, they're antisocial people. And I think that's an understatement. There's something pathological or wrong, I think, with someone who thinks that it is a normal way to resolve problems by just using violence. Um, we're in 2021 for goodness sake. Um, but anyway, a situation like this, like I said, I don't think it's on par with a mugging or a gang attacking an innocent person, but I just think it's reflective of a particular side of our society. And yes, you get them in other parts of the world as well. You get this, you can find examples everywhere, but I'm British and I'm focusing on UK society. People just need to chill out. They need to, I don't know, just respect each other. Just if you dislike a guy, then just, I don't know, is it really necessary to get into a bloody fight in the street where you're going to end up either in a situation where you'll be seriously hurt or he's seriously hurt, and then you're going to be, in serious legal problems? Um, I don't really understand it. I understand people lose their tempers, and everyone has a limit. I mean, let's just present a scenario here. If I was with, say, a girlfriend or a wife, that would be a certain degree of responsibility as a man. Now, if some drunk yob or a gang were to harass us, obviously I'd do what I could to protect her. I'm that sort of man. But that doesn't mean I trivialize this sort of street fight situation. One big problem with cinema, and it's not just Hollywood, you get this in Asian cinema, you get it in film business, is it kind of glamorizes street fighting like it goes down a certain way. Like, two guys or two women for that matter are fighting, and it's, one kind of wins, and then it's the other just gets up and dusts him or herself off and walks off. Sometimes it goes down like that. But the reason street fighting is dangerous is because there's no rules. Anything happens. There's no, maybe sometimes someone in the crowd might kind of have some control over it. They might kind of break it up, or at least if one person's going too far, pull them off, something like that. But in a street fight, let's say two people are fighting on a pavement, and then they stumble onto the road, and a car comes and one of them gets hit. What if they fall back and hit their head against the concrete? There's all sorts of scenarios that can happen. And then, the other person will say, It's terrible, I didn't mean to do that to them." Well, of course, they didn't mean to do it. But this is what happens. It's recklessness. And unless someone is defending themselves from an assault, or they're protecting a more vulnerable person, then it really is a stupid way to solve things. Now, I'm not a pacifist. I've been in the boxing ring, and I don't want to be braggadocious about that. It was an amateur experience. It was one fight, but that's a very different environment because it's controlled. You have a referee, you have ringside doctors. It's mutually agreed. It's just a lot more controlled. A street fight, anything could happen. And it kind of bugs me. People come out with these comments on social media, or especially on YouTube. They start debating the fighting skills as if this is legitimate. Like, oh, he is weak, or uh, she isn't tough enough, or something like that. That sort of mentality is legitimizing this nonsense. It's just, you know, be civilized people, and I don't know. It's a little bit depressing, but like I say, in the grand scheme of things, ultimately people are just hurting each other. Still, street fights can end up with a fatality in the worst case scenarios for the reasons I've stated. And people who say, well, I'm an honest fighting man, that's fine, but do you have self-control? Can you walk away from a fight? Because it takes just as much of a man to walk away from an unnecessary fight as to go into one. That's something I take issue with traveler culture, this idea that you always have to fight. What about times when it's really not necessary? This whole BS about honor and so on. And I'm not just saying it's a traveler community. You get it in all sorts of, let's say, communities where being alpha male is really, really the big thing. Now, I'm pretty alpha, but I'm not stupid. I'm not going to get into a situation I know I can't win unnecessarily. Um, but sometimes, it isn't just about violence, it's also about respect for other people. I really despise these idiots who just think they can shout out something to strangers. Um, it's just such a depraved mindset. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Just shouting out something at a stranger, what, because you're in a gang? I do think we need to have a debate in this country about what is masculinity. I I'm all for masculinity. I think positive masculinity is a good thing. Part of positive masculinity is being controlled and not just lashing out and not treating people with disrespect just for the sake of it. Um, it's just about carrying yourself as a decent human being. Who knows what the background of this was? Maybe it was something that really escalated, but I mean, it's not that unusual. You'd probably find examples all over the country of something similar. But I think what's troubling about it, and this is the consensus in the comments, was that the crowd were just so desensitized. I mean, one of these guys was bleeding, for goodness sake. It's not like just a few punches were thrown. They were really basically killing each other. I mean, I think if it had have went on, one of them would have ended up dead. I don't know how it ended because the video footage was only about a minute long, but in that minute, it was pretty violent. People just get desensitized to things, and that's concerning. So if you're watching a fight and you're encouraging it in that sense, a street fight. I think that is very different from if you buy a ticket to go to a boxing match, because in a boxing match there are rules, there is control. It's a totally different environment. It's still risks, it's still violence, but I do think it's a different environment. Let me know your thoughts.